morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Enjoying the conference so far? Well, I am. Had a great time yesterday, and thanks for the Influence Group and Nicole for the good introduction. I'm here to speak about a project here that is very near and dear to me. We've been working on it for the last year and a half, so I hope you learn something from what we've been doing. A little bit about me. My name is Gaurav Khadse. It's a little difficult to pronounce, so please call me as GK. I go by that if you meet me around. I'm an architect by background. I've worked in the architecture industry for about 8 years, working for different health systems, designing hospitals, building them through. And then about a decade ago, I decided to move to the owner's side. I just was more interested in what's happening there. A lot of strategic decisions being made, so I moved there. I have been working on the owner's side for about more than 10 years now. So I have just got to know all the challenges there, and I hope to share some today and how we've come up with some strategies to mitigate some of the challenges. So what I'm going to talk to you today is about capacity planning and how we are going about increasing our inpatient capacity in one of our buildings, and what levers we have used to pull and really assess how space is utilized and how we can really think about space a little differently. And that's why the title of the presentation is Thinking Outside the Building. Instead of just expanding the building, what are the strategies, what are the levers that we can pull to really increase our capacity? So with that, let me just jump into the meat of the presentation. For those of you who are not familiar with Houston, I'll tell you a little bit about the Texas Medical Center. And I really urge you to visit Houston and the medical center if you're in this field, because you'll truly be fascinated by what the medical center is. So what you see on the screen here is a picture of the medical center, and off in the background you'll see the picture of downtown Houston. So the Texas Medical Center is this huge life sciences complex. It is the 8th largest business district in the world. So you can think of it, how big of a business district it is. It has more than 50 medical institutions, about 50 million square feet of healthcare space. And there are institutions like Methodist, MD Anderson, Texas Children's, St. Luke's, Baylor, and several others. Some important facts about the medical center: 100,000 people are employed there. They see 10 million patients a year. It's about 3 square miles and growing. There's a huge biotech park that's also coming south of the Texas Medical Center. And a baby is born there every 20 minutes. That just blew my mind. So it's a pretty huge ordeal. And you can see, compared to what Houston's downtown is for scale, how big the medical center is. So Texas Children's is part of the medical center. And what you see there are our buildings. We have several buildings. This is our flagship campus. We have the Neurological Research Institute. We have a Feigen Research Center for Pediatric Health. We have outpatient facilities for pediatrics, acute care facilities, as well as a pavilion for women, infant, and children. And that's where I'm going to focus about today. We've also have about 36,000 admissions that go through. Some big numbers. We have 15,000 employees, faculty, and staff. And we have about 3 campuses across. But today I'm going to focus on the medical center. In the medical center, we've also purchased 2 buildings recently, as of 2017, that were office buildings from Baylor College of Medicine and St. Luke's. So it's the building right on the white towards the left of the screen, and then one which is towards the north with the 2 needles. Those 2 were medical office buildings that were leased, lots of tenants in those buildings. These were pre-COVID purchases, and they were pretty good purchases at that time. With that being said, the topic of discussion today is the Pavilion for Women. So when this building was built, it's a 16-story building. The vision behind this building was to be a one-stop shop for women's health, pre-pregnancy, during birth, post-pregnancy, and aftercare. And so this building has outpatient clinics, inpatient beds, as well as NICUs in it. This building, when it was built, was completely built out. There were very few shelf spaces that were there, about 20%. And over time, those shelf spaces have filled up too. We have about 6,500 deliveries that happen in this building, and in order to increase that capacity, we have to expand the building. So there were two choices in front of us. One was we expand this building vertically, and this building has the capacity to go up 8 floors, and build it out, keep some shelf space, and increase our capacity that way. So we started evaluating what does it really mean to go vertically, and what is our real need in terms of beds and stuff. With 6,500 beds, those are the numbers we had. We had NICUs, LDRs, C-section rooms, postpartum, antepartum. But in order to go further, and we were looking at 2030, 8,500 births, we had to increase each of those through the continuum of care. You couldn't just increase one service line and make it work. So the option was you go vertical, and if you go vertical, it didn't make sense to go vertical halfway through. So you didn't want to just build 4 floors, which is your need for 2030. You would have to build the entire thing, which is 8 floors, so you end up paying for 4 shell floors. The other thing was, in order to go vertical, you had to build a high-rise elevator bank, which means disrupting all the other floors. So we started thinking, okay, what does that mean? What does it cost? So of course, the cost, and this is pre-COVID, guys, this is probably twice as expensive now, but pre-COVID, we were looking at a $300 million total project cost. And that really didn't work out because paying for 4 shell floors kind of broke the pro forma for what we were trying to do with 8,500 deliveries. So, and there was operational impact. The other floors would get impacted. So for those 5 years when this is being built, you're not making as much as you would have. And of course, the logistics on site. This photo actually shows the entrance to our building. If we had to go vertical, you would have to put a crane right at the entrance. You would have to put a hoist. You have to put garbage dumpsters, everything, and a green fence. So that is what your building would look like for the next 5 years while this vertical construction is going on. So we decided, okay, well, that doesn't seem like the best idea, but let's keep that aside and see what other options are there. So we started exploring other strategies. And there was a great panel discussion this morning. I think they all talked about this. You really want to leverage your existing space well, instead of just building out. So we started thinking, how do you increase capacity in your inpatient building? So the first thing was evaluating operations. We found out that the triage beds, we were lacking triage beds. So a lot of women who came to the building went into a bed, and they kind of bottleneck beds. So we said, okay, how do you increase your triage capacity? Let's look at everything around. How do you really create triage beds? So we started looking at that. The second thing was, as I mentioned, this building has clinics in there. It was envisioned as a one-stop shop for women. So there were clinics. Was that the best use of an high occupancy building with clinics in there? Can we relocate clinics out? Where do the clinics go? So we started thinking about that. And then the last thing was, well, create that capacity and then try to infill that with patient beds. Fortunately, this was all happening pre-COVID, 2019. And when COVID hit, the 2 buildings that I talked to you that we had acquired, leases were coming up and they were not being renewed. So there were office spaces that we were now going to hold that were sitting vacant right across the street from the Pavilion for Women. So we decided, well, that is a good strategy. Let's leverage our vacant space. Let's move our clinics out to that building. We still wanted to maintain that one-stop shop. So we had to rebrand the building, connect the building back, but it still made more sense than vertically going up. So we said, okay, well, the second strategy works out. We have to find some triage space. Let's move our clinics out, and then let's backfill Pavilion with inpatient beds. So we implemented a 3-phase strategy. Phase 1, get a quick hit. Find triage space, build it out. Within 8 to 9 months, you have some capacity. Second, move the clinics out. And third, build out phase 3, which is backfill. And the cost, about $100 million cheaper than going vertical. Again, pre-COVID costs. Right now, we are looking at phase 3, which are coming out to be a little more than what we had anticipated. So phase 1, we were quickly able to identify some underutilized space. We look at operations. We talked to several teams that were in Pavilion, and we found out that the transportation team that was on the first floor really was not leveraging its space for the full potential. So this is really where the entrance of the building is, and we said, okay, let's take the transport space out, consolidate them, and create at least 5 triage rooms there. And by doing that, we were able to release 5 inpatient beds because that was the bottleneck there. This is the picture about 5 weeks ago. We are almost there. This is now operating as of last week. with 5 triage beds. We were also able to leverage some shell space on the 11th floor, which was antepartum, and create more beds, triage beds there. Again, we didn't have exterior windows, so these were observation triage beds, releasing again inpatient capacity. This gave us about 8 extra inpatient beds. The second thing we started working on, and we are in the midst of this, is rebrand the tower that we bought that's across the street into a Texas Children's aesthetic, as well as giving that one-stop shop experience to the patients. So in order to do that, of course, we came up with a design that blended it with the rest of the campus. But the most important thing was we had to build a bridge that connected it to the pavilion so it looked like a seamless experience, as well as a connection to the existing building. From a wayfinding standpoint, we have colors for each building, so we had to extend that palette to this new building. We gave it a lavender color, of course, women's services, and rebranded the lobbies of that building. So that's one of the things we are working on right now. This is another view. On the left is the new bridge. On the right side is the existing bridge that's there that connects the Oakwind Tower, which is the other tower we bought in 2018. Some images of how we are trying to rebrand the elevators with that lavender color so that it looks like a one-stop shop for women. One of the big challenges of this building was it was an office building. So it was an open floor plan, 40,000 square feet. This is equal to a football field length. So really, the challenge is how do you put a clinic in here and make it still feel like it is a boutique experience for the women. So we started looking at what are the strategies we can use. One of the things was we didn't want it to feel, from a wayfinding perspective, very organic and people trying to find their way to different clinics. We also wanted to leverage standardization, which is what the panel talked about today. Dr. Jones doesn't get exam room A and Dr. Smith doesn't get exam room B. Everyone gets the same type of exam rooms. So there are 53 exam rooms that we wanted to plan on this floor. So we decided to go with a concept where we had pods designed. Every exam room would still be the same, but these would be pods that you can then flex between. And then the simple path of circulation would be everyone comes to a central reception, registration, and then funnel to the different pods. And each pod would have a small sub-waiting, making it give that like a boutique feel to that small pod. And every pod will have its own identity in the form of color, wayfinding, graphics, as well as identification. So this is a view of the pod. Each pod had 6 exam rooms with 2 offices. So the providers can work the 3 exam rooms, and then if they wanted to expand, they can go to the next pod. Every exam room set up the exact same way, so you could flex. We did design a little bit of a different pod on one of the floors where we did 9 exam rooms instead of 3. This was based on their operational model, but again, the pods were the same. We didn't customize each exam room to be different. In this case, you'll see there are 9 exam rooms and then 2 provider offices and a central workstation. Each pod had its own subweight. Here is a view of the central reception area where you come in, you show yourself, you're given your pod, and then you walk into the space where each pod, as you can see, has its own identity. You have a graphic, you have color, you have ceiling elements and flooring elements that kind of tell you what that pod is. You can see the different pod progressions down that corridor. The workstation also goes forward and takes the colors of the pod into the clinical work area. So as of today, this is last week, we finished connecting the bridge structure from the Pavilion for Women, which is our inpatient tower, to the Baylor building, which is the main tower. It was an exciting weekend deal where the whole main street was shut down, but it's up now, and in a couple of weeks, we will have the enclosure going up as well. Which brings me to phase 3. So we are now working in the programming and schematic design phases for phase 3. The spaces that were vacated, which you're seeing in the red blocks, are what we are backfilling. So we've looked across the continuum of care again to see what we need to increase and being very thoughtful about not creating bottlenecks by increasing just one service line. What typically happens is you would be inclined to just say, okay, postpartum, there are 24 beds, let's put 24 beds on top. But is that what you really need? And what is your rate limiter? So we've been looking at that very carefully. Again, data has been our friend. NICU has been our rate limiter in this case. So we could get a max of 35 NICU beds, and that has really helped us determine What is it in terms of LDR beds? What is it in terms of postpartum beds that we need to put back in phase 3 and help us keep some flexibility? So we're working towards 8,500 deliveries and hope to finish this project by the end of 2025. Of course, the escalation challenges are there for phase 3. Good thing was we bought out phase 2 in time, but phase 3 is now facing some of those important discussions where we are trying to scale it back and make sure we're leveraging all our space. So that's it, folks. I hope 25 minutes is a short time to go, but I promised Nicole that I'll keep it to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, GK.